So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning for another one of our weekly webinars. We hope you had a lovely Easter and extra long weekend. Although it was in isolation, we hope that you found some joy over the Easter weekend. So today our webinar is going to be hosted by our Principal Health Coach, Bee Pennington, and she will be sharing strategies and answering your questions on how to adapt to living in our current new world while maintaining your health and well-being. So I'm going to flip it over to Bea and let her introduce herself and set up the webinar for this morning.
Beautiful. Thanks, Courtney. And before I go any further, if I can just say happy birthday for Sunday, because I imagine it's not the easiest time to have a birthday that you're celebrating. And tomorrow is Jabe's birthday, which he's going to hate me for sharing, but nonetheless, we wish him a happy birthday tomorrow. I think, yeah, these social celebration times are probably, I think, one of the trickier things that people will be navigating. So today, my intention for today is to talk through some strategies to help you feel a little bit better in your world as you see it. And so some of that is, the intention is to be quite practical and guide you with some step-by-step things, and other things will be a little bit more conceptual. And there's probably one or two key concepts that I do want to make sure that I get across to you today. One of them is the empowering nature of you getting to choose what you think and ultimately feel. So even though we're surrounded by a lot of talk and quite a sort of oftentimes a negative stream of conversation and content, we always get to opt in or opt out. But you also get to, even further than that, internally you get to decide what it all means to you. So we'll talk about that maybe a little bit more throughout it. And the other thing that's kind of a big picture that I really want to make sure we get across today is the idea of curiosity. So I know that some of the questions that have already come through will be talking about habits and binging and doing things you don't particularly want to do. And I really want to just frame the idea that curiosity is the kindest way to find out about yourself. So anytime we're making a choice, whether it's about when I go to sleep or the type of food I eat or how often I eat or how I communicate with the person I'm in isolation with, if we're really curious about our choices and how we move through it, it means we get to learn, and if we want to upgrade that, then we have the opportunity to, because we've understood where we've come from. So hopefully that makes sense. And thank you for tuning in and joining us.
Wonderful. So I'm going to throw one of the first questions to you, Bea, that has come in through the week.
Yeah.
So someone has said, I've been trying to kick my coffee habit for a while as it makes me feel jittery. And now that I'm at home, I'm finding I'm drinking it even more. What would you suggest as an alternative or a solution to coffee?
Okay, so coffee is an interesting one. I'm trying to maybe get my head around, did it make them feel jittery previously and now they're having more and they're even more jittery? Not sure. But either way, the approach will largely be the same. We can definitely talk to what are some alternatives to coffee. We know that what coffee does is it sends us into that sympathetic nervous system state, right? It heightens our feelings and sensations. In what we might refer to as the normal world, I guess a lot of people relied on stimulants like coffee in order to feel somewhat normal or be able to move through the day. And now, really, the whole world has kind of, the brakes have gone on and we're living in a bit of a slower world. And so to be having something that shoots you up into that heightened state, but you're not really running to a meeting and trying to get stuff done and you're not using all of that fuel, it makes sense that it would make you feel probably even a little bit shakier and more jittery. So I'll go back to curiosity. So we're talking about coffee, but let's just say we're talking about equally sugar, or I'm eating too much bread, or I've noticed whatever the thing is that you're doing more of than you want to. Before you go to do whatever it is, so go and make your coffee, give yourself a little bit of space. So give yourself 30 seconds to sit and just get really curious. What is it that having that coffee is going to do for me? Am I using it to suppress a feeling? Am I using it to boost my energy? Is it a distraction? Is it a boredom tool? And there's no right or wrong. It's all about sort of unpacking and uncovering what's behind it. And then when you understand what's behind it, you might decide that, or you might learn that you're having coffee because you're just bored out of your brain, and it's the thing that kind of gives you a little hit and you feel good. In which case, if you had that information, you can then sort of go, well, what would be something else that I could choose to do that could give me a sort of reward that won't make me feel jittery, right? So you can maybe find that a little bit of movement might make you feel good. You might find that it's the habit of going and the process of having the warm drink that's the thing you like. So maybe swap it out and have something like a herbal tea or a cup of, I reckon I drink about 500 litres of warm water a day. Almost not exaggerating. But, you know, if it's the habit of going and having the hot drink, just swap it out for something else. There's dandelion tea is an alternative that's kind of the closest coffee tasting thing that's not coffee, or obviously decaf is another alternative, but tapering out. And sometimes if we're talking to people who want to stop drinking so much coffee, we talk about reducing over time. So what you might initially do is, let's just say you found yourself having 5 cups of coffee a day. Then tomorrow your goal might be to have 4, and then the day after might be to have 3, and then the day after that might be 2. And then you might look at just still having the 2, but making them weaker. And just kind of, I think something like coffee can kind of have a little bit more of an impact on your nervous system. So there's nothing wrong with tapering down from a lot of coffee. Is that kind of answering Courts?
Yeah, definitely. So some good alternatives to coffee itself. In terms of, obviously within that question, there's a little bit about, you know, making changes. So you mentioned like being a bit curious and giving yourself that 30 seconds or time before you engage in, you know, making a coffee. Are there some other steps or strategies that you would suggest for anyone that wants to sort of make a general change around something they're noticing they're doing a little bit too much?
Well, I think understanding why you're doing something is probably one of the most important parts of that. So if I know what is driving me, so the first time I ever did a 3-day fast, I learned that I use food to change my state. So it was a boredom thing. And then by doing that 3-day fast, I learned that I was actually hungry once a day, which meant that going forward, when I was making decisions about whether or not I was going to eat, I did so knowing that I actually wasn't probably hungry, and that what I could do is have some water instead. So depending on what you know about your health goals and where it is you want to be and how you want to feel, you get to lean into that a little bit more. So if we're talking circuit breaker stuff, and you're going to go and make your 5th coffee of the day and you're frustrated by that, give yourself the 30 seconds and just figure out what the emotion is or what the need is that's being met by that coffee. Go and have a big drink of water. And then sometimes doing something physical, if we want to change the way that the brain is wiring, so we want to kind of interrupt that, go and have a coffee, have a coffee, have a coffee, have a coffee, but you just kind of want to cut that out. Use the brain in a different way for a couple of minutes. So do Tetris, go and do 30 squats, go and do, you know, like I said, have a glass of water. Use your brain in a different way. If you can walk around the block, walk around the block. What we don't want to be relying on is willpower. It's a greatly flawed approach to controlling any of this sort of stuff. And so instead of using willpower, use those sort of circuit breaking strategies to redirect the brain. And then if you come back, you've inquired about what the mood or the feeling or the need is that's being met. You've had a big glass of water, because most of the time we're just thirsty anyway. Go and do something physical or play a Tetris game or something like that to use your brain in a different way. If you've done all of that and you come back and you want your coffee, have your coffee. But learn about the coffee. So have the coffee and then just notice that that's the curiosity piece coming back. How do I feel when I had the coffee? Did I actually feel really good because I went in knowing and understanding my motivation for doing it? And then once you've kind of, so you're gathering information, right? Every time you make a choice that's been investigated, next time you go to make a similar choice, you've built up your knowledge bank about why you're doing that thing. And so you might make a different decision, but you might also not. And that's okay as well. If you're learning and learning and learning, it's always a good thing, I think.
Awesome. One question that just popped into my head while we were talking about that. So again, we're talking about change, and currently we are having more contact with, you know, the people that we live with. How can I include others in my change and make sure that they're being supportive? If I have a partner or kids or a husband or a wife that maybe is just like, oh, why do you care so much? Have another wine when you're wanting to make that change. How can we have conversations around that?
That is such a good question, Courts. Nice work. So my actual instinct on that is to let go of the need for anyone else to need what I need, right? As soon as I need you to be supporting me in order for me to do what I need, what I want to do, I'm at the mercy of you being on board or not. Having said that, so that's a clarity piece for me. Am I really clear about my purpose? Am I really clear about what it is I want to achieve? And that's on me, right? But if I do really value the support of others, I think that's communication. Sometimes we just expect that because people know us or live with us, that they totally get us and we make absolute sense to them. So what we can sometimes forget to do is talk about the real meaning or the outcome of things. And so if I said to you, Courtney, I've been drinking 5 coffees a day and I've got to admit, like, I'm buzzing like a crazy thing. But what it actually does is it upsets my tummy and I feel like I'm sick all the time. And that means I don't have motivation and energy. So I really want to stop drinking that many coffees. Could you be my accountability buddy? And if you notice that I'm going to have coffee, can you just come and have a conversation with me? So what I've done is I've explained the outcome of the end goal, right? Why it actually matters to me, but I've also given you a role. So I've requested that you fulfill a role, and you may or may not be open to that. And it's, you know, I need to be open to you either wanting to come on board or totally not getting it. So kind of understand, some people work well with accountability, some people don't, some people are quite personally motivated. But yeah, communicate what it is that your outcomes are, what it is you want to achieve by making the change. And then, so you might even say, maybe give me the space to do what I need to do. I don't actually need you to do or say anything. What would be the most helpful for me actually is for you not to comment on my coffee drinking while I go through the process of change. So understanding your drivers, the things that help you make change, and then being really clear with communicating with them.
Wonderful. I think that's a really good tip, like giving people a role and explaining, in this change or in this process, this is how I'd like you to be a part of it, instead of giving them the opportunity to be included in your change as well.
But also remember that the people that you might naturally think are on your dream team, I call it the dream team, are the people who've got your back. I'm on people's, I would hope, as a health coach, I want to be on my patient's dream team, as does their practitioner. But sometimes the people closest to you can feel quite challenged by your desire to upgrade your own health or whatever it is that you're doing. And so that can be quite confronting. So don't assume that your husband or wife or child or parent or best friend or whoever is naturally going to be on your dream team. You might need to outsource that. And so it might be a friend who shares similar values. It might be someone you work with, you know, that you've had these chats with around the coffee machine or whatever. Or it might be someone professional that you can just lean into for this kind of support.
Wonderful. Well, I think we've really unpacked that question.
I think we have to.
So, another question that came in through the week was, I feel as though I am doing nothing all day and I'm struggling to get sleep at night. Do you have any tips for getting to sleep?
That is a really good question. And I think we've spoken about this before. People are like watching Tiger King and they're up on Netflix and they're using it to distract themselves from all of the stuff that's happening. What your body loves is predictability and cycle. You know, think about the day turns in the same sort of 24-hour cycle every day. Your hormones do a similar sort of thing. There's an expectation, you know, from your body about what is going to come. And the best way to keep that on track is to kind of, as much as you can, stick with a natural rhythm. So there are two things that I'll speak to with regards to sleep. One of them is called priming. It's the start of the day. And one of them is called sleep hygiene, which I think Jabe and Rebecca maybe have already spoken to, but I'll touch on it briefly. So you want to aim to really roughly wake up at about the same time each day, if you can. And what I'm personally loving is not setting my alarm. So I'm now waking up when my body wants to wake up, which it turns out it's still 5:30, which is quite annoying. But anyway, so you wake up, and priming means things like, if you can get into natural sunlight, go and stand in the sunlight, even for just 2 minutes, and let the sun come onto your skin. Drink some, warm water, or even just some water. Do some really nice either breath work or some gentle moving. So like some nice slow squats or something. So I'm thinking of kind of getting the juices going, right? Starting the engine up and getting it moving. If you're the sort of person who's inclined to use that time also for setting up your day emotionally and mentally, that's a nice time to do some gratitude or some intention writing, some journaling or something. A little meditation piece can be nice to start the day. And then you go into your day. For people who have always been going to offices or, have driven to a job, I would say get up and have a shower and have your breakfast and get yourself dressed. You don't necessarily have to wear makeup if that's a nice opt-out for being at home. But try and just let the body know that the things are still happening. And then towards the end of the day, we want to tell the body that sleep's coming. And again, we kind of want to be aiming to really go to bed at similar times each day. And so about a couple of hours out from sleep, you want to have finished your dinner. You don't really want to be digesting while you're asleep, because digestion takes an enormous amount of attention. And there's a heap of other stuff your body needs to be doing while you're sleeping. And so a couple of hours out, make sure that you've finished eating. And then I kind of like to think of, if I was out in nature around a bushfire, a campfire, what would I naturally do? So the light would be lower. There would be nothing stimulating me. So all the screens naturally go off. Blue blockers and things like that are really helpful, but they don't stop your brain being stimulated. So, if you can reduce the technology, that's always a good thing, and do something else like read a book or do some knitting or some drawing. I mean, have you seen how many people are doing puzzles?
Yeah.
Puzzles. There's a resurgence in puzzles. It's so good. But really what we're doing is we're calming the body and telling it sleep is coming. If you've brushed your teeth, you've got your jammies on, you're well and truly fully finished digesting your food, you might have had a herbal tea or something that's equally calming. Then when that sleep wave comes, just go and jump into bed. Something quiet like writing can be really nice, or a little bit of reading. What's not so helpful for the brain is Netflix.
Yeah.
Obviously.
So
the point of that really is that predictive part, right? That the body anticipates what's coming because you do the similar sort of timing thing each day, and it understands, oh, she's had the shower, she's brushed her teeth, oh, the tea. Right, like the baby stuff, feed them, bathe them, read a book and put them to bed each day at about the same time. We know what's coming.
Just on that, so that's like really good tips for having that routine, I think, as well at the start of the day for waking up and also for going to sleep. What about for parents who have got kids, so maybe struggling to get the kids to bed and then able to have that routine? Oh, there's a street cleaner going past. Sorry if you can hear that.
How convenient.
For those people, or also on sort of the other end of the spectrum, those with housemates, and the housemates want to do things at night. They want to open a bottle of wine and do the jigsaw puzzle. When you're surrounded by others, how can you maintain your own sleep hygiene?
So you're always in charge of your own actions, right? What you can't control is what other people do and think. And so it comes back to that communication piece, sharing space with others. Make sure that they understand why the sleep's more important to you, right? You might feel like you're being disruptive to them by needing them to be really quiet. But if they really understand why it's important to you, they just might be able to compromise. Like they might just be able to reduce the volume on what they're doing. But equally, from the perspective of taking responsibility for yourself, find other things to further assist it. So do you need to put earmuffs? You know what I mean?
Earplugs.
Earplugs. Do you want to put earplugs in? Do you need to wear an eye mask? Do you have lavender oil on your thing? Do you need to just listen to a meditation? Like, is there a sound that you can listen to that's just other than what they're doing? And it's all about negotiation. I think it's tricky when you're sharing a space. I think it's always probably, there's a bit of negotiation going on.
Yeah.
Communicate with kindness. And also try if you can to understand their perspective. So we're like, but I want to be healthy and I want the sleep. So I win because, I'm making the better choice. But for them, where they're coming from, that glass of wine in the puzzle might be really important from their perception of their own well-being. So don't underestimate the value of their choices.
Yeah.
As for children, I think even outside isolation, this is like parenting 101, right? Try to get your kids to bed. They just may not. Kids, I imagine, are feeling quite discombobulated, and so staying steady and predictable from a parenting procedure strategy is going to be really helpful for them. I was actually thinking of parenting when we were talking about this webinar because, I think it's changed the dynamics of family life, like in a way that I could never have imagined, right? And so parents are now school teachers. And what I wanted to say to the parents who are doing homeschooling is, you're not the teacher, you don't have to be. So don't feel like you have to own that space. One of the best things I did years ago as a parent was a course by Positive Parenting Solutions. And what was really great about that course is it gave you a whole lot of communication strategies and languages and way to use consequences and ways to communicate effectively with your children, whether you're in isolation or not, that are really, really helpful. So if you do have smaller children, Positive Parenting Solutions is a fantastic course.
Yeah, and we'll make sure, if you're interested in that, we'll make sure we'll pop a link for that when we post this to Facebook in the comments. And also when we send out the email with the replay, we'll make sure there's a link and some information about that available for you if it has tickled your interest.
Actually, while we're talking about links, Courtney, I should have actually said it at the time. When we were talking earlier on about the coffee stuff and that the habit and maybe overeating, and for lots of people it's probably sugary food, because what we're hearing from lots of people is like that they're wearing a face mask at home not because of the virus but because they want to stop eating so much food. So people are bored of eating a lot. But our healthy friend Maddie Lansdowne did a podcast, I think last week, maybe the week before, and it was all about emotional eating. It was called Mastering Emotional Eating. I think it was episode 71. And he speaks with an American lass, and they speak brilliantly to the emotions of eating and the idea that as a society, I'm kind of going off track, but stick with me. But as a society, we're not given permission to feel all of our feelings. So even in the context of a lot of people reporting feeling anxious or sad or worried and these sorts of things right now, people are looking for solutions to not feel those feelings. And what I particularly loved about that podcast and wholeheartedly agree with is the idea that every single feeling is incredibly valuable and we need to feel it. If we don't express or process or understand that feeling and we try and squash it down with food or hide it away with another fake feeling or just ignore it completely, where does it go? It doesn't go anywhere. It stays in there somewhere, but also we don't learn much about ourselves. And so permission to feel your feelings is a really big piece of health that I think we don't get to talk about enough.
Yeah. And again, we'll pop the link to Maddie's not website, podcast as well in the email, as well as we'll make sure that it's available for everyone on Facebook too.
Awesome.
Moving on to another question, and again, this is come from a parent, so all those with kids at the moment might be also thinking this. It says, I've always struggled to get my kids to eat healthy foods. Do you have any advice now that I'm home and cooking for them all the time?
Yeah, I do have some advice. So I guess when I was thinking about children and food, I think the coolest thing about kids is that they're naturally curious. So by nature, they kind of love exploring and figuring stuff out, which we can really lean into. If you're the person responsible for bringing food into the house, buy the food that you want your family to eat, right? If it's there, if you've bought it and it's in your house, we're basically saying eat it. So if you are opting for your family to be choosing healthier food, then buy healthier food, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to go straight from processed food to only whole organic food. Like, you can do it in steps, right? Your first step might be just finding, so instead of having a dairy-based chocolate bar, you might choose a darker chocolate bar that doesn't have dairy in it. So it's not an all or nothing game, it's a transition game across. So upscale your purchases. But I like the idea of bringing play and fun into the food thing. So you could get a whole bunch of vegetables out of the fridge and put them on the countertop and say to the kids, what's the most creative meal you can make? Or show me your most creative presentation with just 3 of those veggies or 4 of those veggies, or, kind of make games out of things if you can. But really my tip is get them involved. And what we know about kids is they're creative and curious. And what we know about kids also is they hate being told what to do. So a generally helpful parenting strategy is, instead of saying, come and cook dinner and do this, you give them options, but they're both options that you're on board with, right? So would you prefer it if we cooked these vegetables and made it a competition, or would you just like to be in charge of cooking dinner all on your own today? And so they then get to go, oh, well, I want to be in charge and do it myself. So, finding ways, like, can they make faces on the plates with the food? And also we talk about nutrition as far as like what the food actually does. How amazing downside we're going to be able to see in the dark if we eat it with the carrots or whatever. But speak to the body benefits of food aside from weight or any of that sort of stuff. I like the idea of it being more of a, energy, and you'll feel really good when you wake up and you'll be able to play with your mates for longer and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think kids, they love an opportunity to show off and show how smart and clever they are. And I love a challenge. So I really like that idea of, would you like to cook dinner and be in charge? Or how creative can you get with these veggies? I've seen on social media a lot of parents getting quite creative and having kids hosting dinner parties, and they get in charge of like writing the invitation and setting the theme, and they set the table and serving mum and dad and the rest of the family, which I think is so sweet, and I think gives them such a sense of value and pride, and they can be really proud of something that they've done.
That's awesome. And I'm simultaneously hearing the eye rolls of a million mothers going
you tell I'm not.
So start basic. If you're one of the women who just eye rolled at that idea thinking that just seems way too much, start really, really basic. And so by starting basic, just upgrade your purchases and smuggle some nutrients in as well. I don't like the idea of necessarily hiding food from kids. I think it's nice for kids to be open to eating healthy food. But if your intention is to make them more robust, then there's nothing wrong with letting them eat healthy food and then putting extra in at the back end.
Yeah. I even still do that now at 28. I hide food. I know much.
You hide it from yourself?
But I don't like it. So I hide my food, and I still eat it. So we've got one more question we might finish up on. And this is one that I think will speak to a lot of people, all ages, people, maybe even students that at school kids that are going to have to do their learning from home, uni students, people that are working from home, definitely me. I feel I am procrastinating and not getting stuff done. How can I get what I need done?
So I think that comes back to that setting yourself up for the day that we talked about with the sleep and the priming. And what but not everybody, but a lot of people will find that if they start their day well, the rest of the day flows. So it might come down to just prioritizing. If you've got 5 tasks to do and 2 of them are really important, or the things that you're finding hardest to get done, just do them first. Just bite down and get them done. And then, depending on your personality, reward yourself with a nice fresh air walk, or a nice cup of dandelion root tea or something.
That's
But no, the short answer is try and get the icky stuff done first, right? Just get it done. You'll feel amazing for it. If accountability is your thing, find someone that can help you out with accountability. So call a buddy in and say, I need to have this done by 11. Can you call me at 11? And if it hasn't been done by 11, go back to curiosity. What's the thing that's stopping you? Are you sabotaging? Or what are you finding hard about staying on track and getting that task done?
Yeah, I think that's really important. And there's starting with those bigger tasks are a little bit difficult. Once you get them done and you feel good, I think that's a really good way to get into flow as well. And kind of when you get a flow
you get momentum.
Yeah. Sometimes I know for me personally, that can be the thing that I struggle with, is just getting going and getting that flow going.
What do you do if you're feeling like you're procrastinating? What's something you do?
Oh, I definitely have a bit of a chat to myself about it. Something that has really been working for me lately, and I just really love the term, is like circuit breaking. So I find, just instead of just sitting there at my desk going, oh, I should do this, and writing a list just for the sake of writing a list, I'm physically being physical. So getting up and going for a walk around the block, getting out of the house, doing something to just bring me away. And when I come back, I sit down and I do this. And I feel that has been really good. And obviously being physical has so many more other benefits as well. So I'm kind of ticking a couple of things that I want to achieve in the day off my list as well.
Awesome.
But definitely for me, getting into the flow and just kind of saying, like, you've got to start. You've got an assignment due this weekend. You need to get going, and just, unfortunately, I'm a very good procrastinator. So this has been 28 years.
Is this your question, Courtney?
There's
a good strategy for study. It's called the Pomodoro technique. And basically it goes something like, you sit down and you work for 20 minutes, you set a timer, and at the 20-minute mark, the timer goes off, and for 5 minutes, you get up and do something else. It doesn't matter what you do. You can eat, drink, sleep, go for a walk. And after the 5 minutes, you come back and you start again. And so that's a strategy that I believe works quite well for studying. It'll come down, I think it'll all come down to personality and learning style. Some people like to just get in and stay in. But if you're the sort of person who needs that, like you said, that circuit break, that might be helpful. Just do the icky stuff.
Yeah, but definitely I've tried, as you were saying, like there's lots of different strategies. I've been coming back to curiosity, I've tried the different strategies. Definitely, I did have a teacher that told me about that idea of setting a timer, working in blocks. And I find that I'm more productive in 40 minutes than I am with a break, than I am sitting there for an hour.
Great.
And she was like, you will eventually start to build, and 20 minutes will become a 40-minute block and you'll be able to work. That's something that really worked for me. And I've tried lots of other strategies, lists and things like that don't work for me, because I feel like I spend too much time making sure that this looks aesthetically pleasing, and then the day is gone. So that's not being productive. But yeah, funny. I would say to anyone that struggles with procrastination, try different strategies, get creative, and see what comes of it.
So before we wrap up, I listened to a podcast this morning, and I really want to make sure I share it, because at the very beginning of this conversation, we spoke about giving yourself permission to feel all of your feelings. And, health is, we talk about the 4 pillars of health, and they're incredibly foundational. They are the thing that we come back to time and again, because they're proven to be powerful when we're wanting to live in a state of good health. So that's, eat, move, sleep, and de-stress, all of them critical. Relationships and spiritual practice, I think, are necessary add-ons that we don't ignore, but we don't get to have as much time talking about them. That whole emotional intelligence piece, I feel like, is one of the biggest pieces of the health conversation. And so the podcast I listened to, Brené Brown has just started a new podcast. It's called Unlocking Us. And so I've only listened to a couple of bits, but this morning it was Dr. Mark Brackish, and it's called Permission to Feel. And so if you're in any way interested in learning about feelings and emotions and what to do with them and how to recognize them. And I'll give you an example of recognize them. This is something they do talk about. This morning, my daughter was really upset because she's had sore ears for like a year and we can't figure out why. And she was yelling at me. She was really, if I looked at her as a parent to a child, I would be like, why is she so angry with me? Like her face looked angry, her voice was raised, her fist was clenched. And so she, for me, looked like anger. And so I went off to the bathroom and I just was thinking about this podcast and I thought about it and I came back into her and I said, when we were just talking, were you feeling really frustrated and fear? Did you feel fear about what was happening with your ears? And she just looked at me and she was like, yeah. And so if you really want to learn about understanding emotions and how to read them and then what to do with that, that was an amazing podcast. And as far as perception of your world and mindset and belief systems and teasing apart the truth from the story you tell yourself, one of my absolute go-tos is Byron Katie, who does a process called The Work. It's all about understanding the truth instead of the story you make up about what's real. And it's a life changer if you lean in and practice it. So I just wanted to make sure I put those two other little extras in there.
Yeah, fantastic. And once again, in the email that you receive, like we'll make sure that all these resources that we're mentioning are available to you. Has she got a book, Brene, not Brene?
Brene does, for sure. Byron Katie?
Byron Katie, called The Work.
She's got, the book that I first read was called Loving What Is.
Yep.
But she's got lots of books.
Okay. She definitely does not procrastinate if she's got.
She does not.
She's probably got.
She's quite good.
We're going to wrap it up for today. So thank you to everyone for joining and thank you to Bee for hosting and bringing some insight around mindset and strategy and also, oh, hang on, we have a question. One moment. Which was the second person about the story you tell yourself?
Byron Katie. So if you Google or look up thework.com, she's got a bunch of information there. She also has a podcast. She does have a bunch of books. The book that I said that I read that kind of introduced me to understanding the process of the work was Loving What Is. She does have some more recent books, but from what I've heard from people, they don't sound like introductory books. They sound like they're kind of quite deep.
Like builders on.
So Loving What Is the kind of the introduction to the concept of the work. She has worksheets that you can download from the site, but you kind of, in fact, Oprah Winfrey did a really great interview with her on Soul Sessions. It was, I would say the good part of a year ago. Yeah, I don't know how searchable that is, but that was a really nice interview to understand the idea of the work as well.
Okay. Awesome. I do remember that podcast. It was a good intro. It's the first time that I'd ever heard of her.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you to everyone for joining. So please join us again next week for our not our second webinar.
Our 20th.
For our next webinar. I've lost count of how many we've done. And make sure that you're following us on our social media. So our Facebook is just Melbourne Functional Medicine. Our Instagram is @MelbourneFXMed. We're posting a lot of content there that is nice little summaries of the things that we're sharing in these webinars, the strategies, little clips that can help you. And you can also throughout the week send us any questions that you have for upcoming webinars, as a few people did today. So thank you for joining us. Have a lovely rest of the day. Get out and get some sunshine while it's out and about.
And get curious. Remember to get curious about all of the things that are happening in your world.
Yes, we look forward to hearing from you. If you want to share, if you've applied any of the strategies that we've mentioned today, please share them with us and let us know how you're going. But enjoy the rest of your week, everyone. Bye.
Bye.